Hello again, everyone, and welcome back. Again, this is Tom Nelson, and this is part 2 of 4 of how AGEs form. It's on AG Advanced Glycation End Products. So, how do AGEs form? AGEs are formed, and we learned in the last video how glucose plays a very major role. AGEs form when a sugar molecule binds to a protein in the body, and it can be a wide number of different proteins. It can even be fat, and the bond remains intact for the life of that protein or cell, that protein or the fat. So the process is called glycation. They can form in either of two ways. It can be either endogenous, which means it forms inside the body, or it can be exogenous, which means that it comes from sources outside of the body. And we're going to look at both of those fairly closely. So whenever food is cooked at temperatures above 120 degrees Fahrenheit, the glycation process is going to begin. AGEs are going to start to form in the food that you're cooking, and that is exogenous. And then when you eat it, then you get it. So the problem is, the higher temperatures are that you cook food, the more of these AGEs that are going to be produced. So the higher the temperature, the greater that glycation process. That means these exogenous AGEs are going to be coming in very large numbers. And they're going to go after things like your eyes, your heart muscle, and they can cause many age-related disorders. It is interesting that from a nutritional standpoint, every degree that you increase the cooking temperature above that 120 degrees Fahrenheit decreases the vitamin and mineral content of the food and the digestive enzymes that you rely on to digest it, but it also changes the structure of that food as well. And so both of which, all of this is going to be very important because your body relies very heavily on all of that, and your antigens are not going to recognize that heavily cooked food, that high temperature cooked food, as even being organic or natural. It will actually reject things like broccoli or spinach. So one of the proteins that sugar molecules like to bond to are your red blood cells. And that again is internal, so that's endogenous. And they will form internally. So they bind to the cell for the life of that red blood cell, which is, most red blood cells live for about 90 to 120 days. And then your body will replace them. And when it does, it'll get rid of those endogens that were produced, and they will be replaced with new red blood cells. But that is the only example of any of the proteins that are attached by glucose of actually even being replaced. The rest of them attach for the life, and they bond in your body, and they stay there for the rest of your life. So your doctor can actually measure your AGE activity. In fact, if you're diabetic, he does that every quarter of the year anyway. And that means that AGEs are counted when you get an A1C blood test. It's the AGEs that determine what your A1C actually is. So the blood tests are taken every 3 to 4 months, every 90 to 120 days, and the cells will be replaced with new ones, and so the doctor can get a snapshot every 90 days of how high your blood sugars actually went. Because the higher your blood sugars go, the more of these AGEs that are going to form in the red blood cells. And so he can measure that. So the A1C is actually a measure. It's a percentage of the total number of red blood cells in your body that are glycated. So that means the higher your blood sugar, the more of those that are going to occur. And for example, an A1C of 7.2 means that 7.2% of all of your red blood cells have been glycated over the last 90 to 120 days. And so they can guesstimate how much damage has occurred elsewhere in your body as a result of that increase in the AGEs in your system. So for diabetic, it's going to give the doctor a measure of how high your blood sugar averaged over the above normal, and it over the last 90 to 120 days. And from that, he can predict how much damage may have occurred to your liver, your kidneys, and all of the other organs of your body. So that A1C, again, is a snapshot of how often your blood sugar has gone over that 110, 120 over the past previous 90 to 120 days. So it's one of the most important monitoring practices in the management of your diabetes. AGEs, due to those high blood sugars, are responsible for the development of all diabetic complications. It is the cause, the root cause of all diabetic complications. They contribute to the development of neuropathy, which kills off nerves, retinopathy, which damages the eyes, causes cataracts, nephropathy, which attacks the filters of the kidneys, and heart disease. The higher the AGE production rate, the higher the risk of developing diabetic complications. So clusters of AGEs can join together to form a long chain. They're called AGE polymers. They accumulate wherever they form. They initiate a massive amount of oxidative stress and inflammation wherever they form. The body's antigens reject them as an invader. They alert your immune system to their existence, and your immune system tries to dispose of them but fails. So, inflammation can rage on in a chronic for a very long period of time. So, food processors add to the problem because they not only add flavor enhancers, texture enhancers, preservatives, food coloring, and salt and sugar and all of these other things, and then they cook them at extremely high temperatures, and all of these things are going to produce massive amounts of AGEs. The foods that are significant in browning, in other words, everyone loves when you brown the meat or you toast the bread and brown the bread. That caramelization has a significant increase of AGE production. Grilled and barbecued beef, donuts, cakes, and wheat products, deep-fried foods, fried foods, broiled foods, and dark-colored sodas are the highest on the list of those that produce AGEs when you consume them. They contain the most. So French fries are usually coated with sugar before they're deep-fried, and that produces a very deep brown, crispy texture, just the way everybody likes it. The sugar produces a massive amount of AGEs during that deep frying process, and it also produces carcinogens. AGEs are very powerful pro-oxidants. That means they cause inflammation, and they modify numerous natural processes, and not in a good way. So raging inflammation, chronic inflammation, will result in the development of numerous chronic diseases. Which ones you get is going to depend on your genetic makeup. So over time, glucose molecules and protein molecules start gumming things up in your bloodstream, and the glucose attaches to the protein molecules and they form clumps. The result is called cross-linking. When proteins become cross-linked, they stiffen, they lose their elasticity. That causes your blood vessels, your vital organs, and your skins to age prematurely. Cross-linking is also known to damage the very tiny blood vessels, the capillaries, that carry blood to and from the heart, which are extremely important. So foods can supply up to 50 times more AGEs than your body would normally produce or able to manage. The accumulation of AGEs and the associated inflammation are major contributors to the manifestation of type 1 and type 2 diabetes and 200 other chronic diseases. So when they collect in your brain, they contribute as a cause of Alzheimer's, and they collect in the arteries, they cause high blood pressure and arterial sclerosis, which means the accumulation of plaque in the arteries that will lead to heart disease. So they're going to build up in your eyes and they're going to cause cataracts. They're going to build up in your kidneys and contribute to kidney failure. They're going to build up in the penis and cause erectile dysfunction. So AGE formation and protein cross-linking are irreversible processes that are going to alter the structural and functional properties of proteins, of lipid components, fats, and nucleic acids, your DNA. They will alter your DNA. So AGEs change the physiochemical properties of the afflicted molecules and induce cellular signaling. They activate transcription factors and the subsequent gene expression. So let's talk about that in English one more time. In other words, in plain English, they contact your genes, they alter their function in more than one way, in many ways, and not in good ways. So AGEs are of particular importance to diabetics because diabetics usually have elevated blood sugar, which multiplies their effect. Some estimates that our diabetics have up to 60% more AGEs than non-diabetics, and they are a major contributor to heart disease. It's one of the reasons that diabetics are 4 times more likely to develop heart disease or suffer a stroke. So AGEs also occur naturally in all high-fat foods, including and especially dairy, in mayonnaise, and vegetable oils. Remember, it's the vegetable oils that are used for deep frying. It's also high in high-protein foods like meats and tofu, especially if the meats are cooked on a grill or broiled or fried. So they're also found naturally in all high glycemic index foods, even more so than the glucose issue that we talked about earlier. We're talking about things like sticky rice, potatoes, sweet potatoes, sugar, and others, especially wheat. So smoking and pollution are also major producers of those AGEs. So now let's proceed to Lesson 9, Part 3 of 4, and how to minimize AGE damage. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and please pay it forward. Thank you.